Hey gang, what's good? Welcome to the channel. Thank you guys for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Oberon rework, both kind of like what the community thinks and what I think, along with the actual rework itself. I'll give you guys the information, but of course I'm not just going to like regurgitate text to you. I want to give you like my thoughts, some synergies that might be showing up, and some stuff that lines up for the future. If you want like the best experience after this video, you should watch the video by Pablo and DE. Look at my little cutie pie. Hello, Pablo. Anyways, his video is great on that, and then we're going to talk about damage attenuation as well. But this rework I'm really excited for. I'm really excited for. Oberon is, in my opinion, like besides like arguably Limbo, I guess you can make the case. Oberon was the last frame that really needed to make his way into the like next wave of DE's current balance approach, which is like make the content not too hard, so that every Warframe is strong in it, and we don't like everyone's welcome to the club essentially. And obviously, while I want my game to be challenging, what's way more important to me is that the game I'm enjoying, everyone of every frame can enjoy it. That's really important. I don't want frames to feel like kind of filtered out based on strength. As it stands, and once this release is done, I think basically 99% of the frames will be viable in almost every piece of content. They'll obviously going to be like strengths and weaknesses for certain pieces of content, but that's good. That's good design. We like that a lot. That's kind of DE's new balance philosophy, and I like it a lot. So yeah, we're going to go over just the rework itself, kind of my sentiment, community sentiment, because this is a forum post, so I'm going to be looking through some comments. I've read a bunch ahead of time, and I've read on YouTube as well, kind of what people think, and I'll give my opinion, and my opinion is very similar. So first of all, you can log in between October 15th and October 21st to receive a free Oberon. So whether you just want another copy to get to feed to the Helminth, or you don't have one yet, I think he's farmed via Railjack now, so that could totally be worth your time to do. Otherwise, you get a Forma up until the end of the year. Just keep in mind of that. And start with rework. Okay. So we have a stat change, and normally stat changes aren't the most impactful, but this one is quite important. We're getting 200 extra armor and 210 extra armor on Oberon Prime. So this is fairly significant, especially pre-Steel Path, but post-Steel Path, this is not very useful. But because he has a percent armor increase in his kit, this is this is not misleading, but like this is more significant than you think, because it's a base number that we actually use. If you like were to buff a Warframe's base stats, and they don't have a percent buff for that base stat, then it inherently means less. But because Oberon does have a percent armor increase, this is more significant than it is just on paper. So this is the big like controversial thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about. This is not Mesmer skin. Okay, I'm the #1 Mesmer skin hater. It's me. I have the hat. I have the T-shirt. Okay, I have the bumper sticker. Like, I hate Mesmer skin. I don't like Revenant's kit design at all. Mesmer skin is awful. I'm gonna read this to you and then I'll explain. So Oberon's original passive was increased. This is basically for companions. This is a companion rework, which is one of the best reworks they've done. Kind of negated the need for this passive. So, new passive. Picking up a health orb or universal orb generates a righteous negation charge for Oberon and allies within affinity radius. Oberon and his allies each have individual caps of 3 righteous negation charges. These are the charges here, these little shields with the vines on them, which looks super cool. I really like the design of that a lot. If a player has a charge, they're invulnerable to incoming damage. When incoming damage is blocked, 1 charge is expended. If a player has multiple charges, they remain invulnerable and receive a small 0.25 second cooldown before an additional charge is depleted. So this is basically your shield gating, your mesmer gating. I believe Mesmer skin has like a 1 or 0.5, I don't remember exactly, second shield gate, which is like a huge part of that ability. What makes Mesmer skin broken, by the way, is not that you're invulnerable. Invulnerability exists in a couple of ways. Like, shield gating is a vulnerability. The problem is, with like a mediocre build, you can get 20 stacks of Mesmer skin, the Mesmer gate lasts forever, and you're just invulnerable, and like, you're disincentivized from using the rest of his kit. With Oberon, now granted, the condition being like a universal orb or a health orb it's a pretty low condition to get that kind of invulnerability, but you only have 3 stacks max, so you have to constantly be cycling through righteous negation, and it works with the rest of his kit really well. The problem with Revenant is that you press 2 on your keyboard and you're no longer incentivized to use the rest of his kit at all. You basically have to force yourself to. With Oberon, you're incentivized to use the rest of his kit to get the Mesmer skin charges, quote unquote. It's inverted. This Oberon is done correctly, right? With my Revenant rework, which you should totally check out, by the way, I think it's really great. I basically reverse that. I have it so that you are incentivized to use Revenant's kit to get more Mesmer skin stacks, and I think that this is righteous negation is Mesmer skin done properly, both in terms of having a smaller shield gate time, or negate gate, whatever time, and then a lower overall shield count. I think 3 is like perfect. So yeah, this is not Mesmer skin. Don't be obnoxious about it. So there's a comment down here about like that's not that it feels out of theme. I think this makes perfect sense for like a paladin to have, which is, by the way, like what Oberon is supposed to be, like kind of like a paladin druid. Although the druid stuff is kind of being wavered out here. A lot of the focus seems to be on the paladin aspect, which is cool because that means that the slot for like a theme of a druid is still there and it can be used somewhere else, which is really exciting. So Smite, as it stands right now, is just like a little thing that you send out, and then it makes secondary little like pulses, or little like projectiles that come out and then deal damage based on the target you hit. The use case for Smite will be basically the same. This will just be, in my opinion, more streamlined and probably a little bit better, as it's going to scale with range, so it doesn't have like a target cap. Basically, you're just going to smite. When you smite someone, they lose a percentage of their health, capped at 75%, assuming scaling power strength, and they lose their overguard, their armor, all their defenses, and they send that damage out, half of that damage out to enemies around them, probably again scaling with power strength. So the use case is the same. You're still going to be targeting Xmas with this. It's just you get to peel their overguard right off, which is really useful. And then again, instead of having those seeking projectiles that were with old Smite, in this case, you just smite down the area around them, which means that the projectiles, the projectiles could only hit so many targets. In this case, it's different, and you could hit everyone within the 6 meter radius. In this case, scaling with strength. Smite, this seems really exciting. I think this might be like what you helmet off. I'm not really sure, but overall, it's still a great ability, and I can see it doing a ton of damage, especially with some of these high health enemies we've got walking around, because of the armor rework way back when. Enemies don't have a ton of armor, but they do have a ton of health. So I'm excited to see what Smite can do. I think it's going to be a really strong ability. Ability 2, Hollow to Ground. Hollow to Ground is useful in Oberon's kit, but needed a quality of life pass. Yeah, no kidding. Hollow to Ground used to be a cone. It's now a full circle. So ability range increases the radius instead of the arc. Thank God. Also increase the height, so that means that like enemies that are like Hellions or whatever that are flying can be affected by it too. Thank God. Huge. Decrease the maximum number of hollowed grounds from 4 to 3. This makes perfect sense, given the increased size. Totally got it. Nullifiers. I think they did something with Frost as well. Nullifiers just nullify the effect of an ability, not the ability itself. So like touching a Frost bubble won't pop it. Touching hollowed ground or remove it, it'll just negate the effects of that hollowed ground or Frost bubble, which is like perfect. I don't know what other frames get affected by this, but it's really, really important and one of the best quality of life changes because nullifiers are extremely obnoxious and have some outdated interactions. Guaranteed radiation status effect. I cannot believe reading through these patch notes reminds me just how outdated Oberon was. Used to be 15% status chance for radiation status effect. It's now 100%, and the ticking is more often, I believe, which is huge. Renewal healing, which we'll go down to a second, is doubled along Hollow Ground, and the Iron renewal armor buff is made base kit to renewal, so we'll talk about that in a second. No armor stripping from Reckoning in regards to Hollow Ground, it's now part of base kit. So 2 synergies got removed here, which is normally like kind of not great. We like synergies, but in this case, the synergies were making Oberon feel like really clunky to play. And so in this case, making the frame easier and more streamlined so he doesn't have to play in one area, because ultimately, like, this is a big weakness that Nidus has, where if Nidus leaves his area, like, he has a really hard time. I don't think I want to subject any other Warframes to that, even though it's a cool theme and it's a cool playstyle. Ultimately, it limits you to like certain game modes, and you want to be able to play your Warframe in ideally as many game modes as you can. We see with things like Kome and Nidus, where like they just suffer in other game modes, and it kind of sucks. Hollowed Eruption Augment. This is the one where you can detonate your Hollowed Ground to do its DOT instantly. This is a DPS increase, essentially. Obviously, it increases the duration, which is huge, and if you want that, that's like plus 200% duration is a ton of duration. So I have to imagine this is good for energy economy. And good for the damage as well if you decide to detonate your Hollow Ground. That's probably not going to be my playstyle, but I personally still think it's really cool. Ability 3, Renewal. This is the healing per second, and it now gives armor as well. In base kit, no longer has to be on Hollowed Ground. So, before it had a energy cost per target, which is insane. Again, very outdated frame. Now it's just 3.5 energy per second it's active, regardless of the number of allies it's healing. Really big. Affinity range. So, it scales with affinity range. This is nice. I believe something else scales with affinity range here. I don't remember what it was exactly. But basically, I think Oberon, which granted, he would have probably taken Vazir and Focus School anyway. But affinity range scaling basically means you're going to want to take Vazarin because Vazarin has an affinity range increase built into it right away. But supports generally do like to take Vazarin anyway. So I think that makes to protect your teammates and you give yourself a vulnerability and so on and so forth. So really nice. Also, Renewal surrounds Oberon instead of being in an area. Again, we talked about this earlier, where you're being like cucked to one area. That kind of sucks. So now it follows Oberon around, which is huge because Warframe in its current state is a very mobile game. Like not literally, actually literally, yeah. But like it's you know what I mean. You move around a lot more. So this makes perfect sense. Players affected by Renewal are given the Iron Renewal buff, which increases their armor by 50% or increases 50% for the casting Oberon and 100% for allies. So allies get their armor doubled, and Oberon gets a 1.5 multiplier to his armor, which is big. This to me speaks about like, and there's some armor down here as well that we'll talk about. Arcane Battery is going to be huge. Obviously, Arcane Universal Fallout will be big on Oberon, but anyone could have guessed that. Arcane Battery is going to be big. And then also with your synergy with Health Orbs, which again, we'll go down to Reckoning and talk about it. Actually, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, one big thing, in my opinion at least, Phoenix Renewal. This is a res that that Oberon gets essentially. I think this has a place in like EDA, ETA, especially if you're not with a like a cooperative four-man. Um, Deaths in EDA, ETA can kind of ruin the runs, so having a 60-second cooldown on a res is actually like pretty good. I'm not saying you have to run it, but like having that available to you, like I've personally ran Well of Life, Trinity's helmet option multiple times just for the status immunity in the res. In this case, a 60-second cooldown on a resurrect, like that's pretty solid and can help you if either you're helping like a new player out, or if you're helping not so new players with late game content. Dying in that content feels really awful. You're basically delegated to watching your teammates have fun. So, or maybe not have fun, depending on the game mode you're playing in ETA. But we're gonna talk about damage attenuation next, so maybe it's gonna be a lot more fun. I don't really know. Anyway, I think the argument's personally worth taking, especially if you know you might need it. Reckoning. Reckoning is a visually impressive ability, but unfortunately lacks the actual power expected of an ultimate. With his rework, we are increasing overall damage output and changing some of the ability synergies. LOS is now present on Reckoning, so that means like you have to see the enemies to ult them. I mean, this is like a really basic, again, obviously like non-LOS abilities break this game so often, so I'm glad for the sake of consistency that it has an LOS check. That's great. Increased bonus damage to enemies affected by radiation status effects to from a flat 625 to 750 per stack of radiation. Basically, if you have 10 stacks, which is the cap for radiation, you take the most damage. Very good. Obviously, Hallowed Ground has guaranteed radiation status effects as opposed to a 15% chance. That's anyway. I'm sorry, I'm being problematic. I know he's outdated. I'm sorry, Oberon. Now that you're guaranteed to basically have a bunch of enemies, as long as they're on your Hallowed Ground, they're going to be irradiated as hell, so they'll easily take the most damage possible from Reckoning. Oberon gains 10 armor per enemy hit. You know how many enemies you can hit with an ability like this? Quite a few. Bonus armor is capped at 1,000 and persists for 30 seconds. That is huge. That is so much armor. I understand armor tanking is not that great, but what people kind of forget to include in their argument is the reason it sucks is not just because it's inferior shield gating, which it is categorically, but you also have to invest in it, which is annoying. You have to build like steel fiber or whatever, which is like shield gating needs like 1 or 2 mods and you are immortal. Health and armor tanking needs like 3 to 4 mods and you are hardly less killable than you were before. It's kind of awful. In this case, you're just getting free armor. So as long as you're not going turbo late game, you're still quite durable, which is really nice. You can stack other forms of DR, and in this case, you have a shield gate plus righteous negation as well. So we have to keep that in mind. Like righteous negation is not going to be 3 stacks that you have to constantly keep up by picking up health orbs. Is very possible, especially if you're spam casting Reckoning. If you've got synth deconstruct, it's really easy to keep those 3 stacks up, but it's all layered together. So you have a ton of armor, you have health. If you can run Arcane Blessing as well, that's a synergy. We're talking about health orbs. That's a synergy that could be really good. I think Oberon will be more durable than people are letting on with shield gating, health tanking, healing, and righteous negation all intertwined. I think he's going to be way more durable than people are giving him credit for. The bonus armor cap does not scale, but the duration can be increased by mod. That's huge. That means you can have 1,000 armor for like probably a minute or something like that. That's insane. With a base 30 seconds, yeah, holy moly. Enemies affected by radiation status give additional 5 armor, and that adds to the duration, I'm assuming. So yeah, holy crap, this guy's going to have so much armor. Arcane Battery is going to be awesome here if you decide to take it. If he needs it, if he needs a spam cast. We'll see if he ends up needing the spam cast. I'm not really sure. Battery is nice, but if you don't need that much energy, the Arcane can go to like something better, like Augmented or whatever. Surviving enemies have their armor removed, 50% armor removed, but again, in this case, you're probably going to build this power strength to get that full strip off 1 cast, because that feels really good and is mathematically usually superior to just taking off a portion of the armor, especially when, in this case, based on the base number, you will just need 200% power strength, which is a little demanding, but nothing crazy. And then a 50% chance of dropping health orb upon death, whether they were killed by Reckoning or not. I'm not sure if this is going to scale with power strength or not. I don't think it says it here, but 50% chance is so great when you're killing that many enemies. And also, again, now they no longer have to be killed directly by Reckoning. Reckoning marks them for death, and then when they die, they have the chance to drop the health orb. And then Reckoning no longer blinds enemies. This is because enemies are going to be irradiated by Hollow Ground, so you don't want enemies blinded, because then when they're irradiated, they can't target each other. Makes perfect sense. Slightly increased casting speed. That's great. It was kind of an aura farm ability for a while, so I guess that makes sense. And the bonus armor granted from Hollowed Reckoning patches now has a grace period. The buff will remain active for 3 seconds after leaving the radius. This is Hollowed Reckoning, which I personally haven't used, but I think it just gives additional armor buff and something else after enemies have been reckoned. So overall, basically, the sentiment that I've read in the comments, which I've read pretty extensively. First of all, this guy's cringe. We do not need more Mesmer Skin. This new passive, again, I just disagree with this fundamentally, and I'm the biggest Mesmer Skin hater on the planet. Please check out my Revenant rework, not to be obnoxious. I just feel like, obviously, is Oberon going to be the most powerful frame in the game? No, not even close. But he can now play the game. Like, that's the most important thing. Oberon players, God, look how cool this looks, by the way. This is for renewal. Yeah, this is for renewal. Like, look how cool that effect is, the little crown he has. That's going to dictate whether you have the buff or not. You get that. Anyways, Basically, the rework to me makes Oberon beyond playable, quite strong. Obviously, nothing insane. But yeah, I agree with this guy. I think that some of the buffs should have a duration when you walk away from Oberon. Granted, I will say the buffs are like a doubling of your armor can be pretty solid. Along with giving flat armor can be pretty solid. I think Hall of Reckoning does that. But yeah, basically, I think that as long as you run Vazarin on this Warframe, affinity range is going to be so large that like there isn't going to be much content where you can walk far enough away from Oberon to not be receiving his buffs. That is my opinion. That is my understanding of how this is going to look. So you're getting healing per second, a bunch of armor, armor stripping, irradiated targets. Like Smite is going to be pretty solid, I think. And then Righteous Negation is probably the strongest thing here. But to me, Righteous Negation is not his entire defensive utility, but it's thrown in there with shield gating and health tanking and armor tanking. To make something that's way more exciting to use and has to very actively be kept up. So now, granted, is it going to be the hardest thing to keep up? No, health orbs are a dime a dozen. You use Symphony Construct, you use Reckoning in this case, and it'll be super easy. But and also Universal Arc and Universal Fallout will be huge in that regard as well, because all the enemies are going to be irradiated due to Hollowed Ground. So in my opinion, this kit is like basically one of the best they could have done. And is it going to be the strongest? No, I don't think it's going to be. I think he's going to be like a fairly mediocre support, but I think he's going to be like him being playable is so important because DE's current balance philosophy is that all frames should be viable in most content. Oberon was one of the few exceptions to that. Except again, I think Limbo's weird. I need to sit down and learn Limbo before I talk too much shit. I hate that frame, but if any Limbo players want to coach me, we can make some content. That'd be great. But Oberon was one of the last frames that really needed some love, and he got it. And this rework is awesome. I'm genuinely excited to play Oberon. I haven't touched this frame in like a zillion years. So yeah, this overall, great job Pablo, great job developers, great job DE. I think this rework is going to be super exciting to play. And even though again he's not like the most remarkable thing in the world, like he looks cooler, he's going to feel better to play. He feels like a complete 2025 Warframe. I'm very excited. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. Give me your thoughts in the comments. We're going to talk about Damage Attenuation now. And yeah, I'm super excited. So thank you guys, DE. I appreciate this rework a lot, and I'm super excited. I already have my fashion train for Oberon done. Maybe I'll show that later. And let's move on to Damage Attenuation and that longer conversation. All right, so now we're taking a look at Damage Attenuation. We have our cutie pie Pablo. Hello, beautiful. Again, I strongly recommend that you watch these videos from the developer workshop. Pablo is very he articulates incredibly well. While these are me, this is kind of just like me schizo posting, rambling about personal opinion stuff while we're regurgitating a little bit of text, so you guys can understand what I'm saying. But I try to like talk about what the community thinks, what I think as someone who with several thousand hours in this game. So damage attenuation is one of the tools that we use to normalize the difficulty of boss type enemies between groups of players. So basically, like, okay, if I have 3 newer players with very not maxed out builds, and then like 1 player with a very maxed out build, that 1 player will basically blow the enemy's brain smooth out right away, and those other 3 players don't get to play the game. Likewise, if an enemy instantly dies, you don't get to interact with their mechanics at all, so you spend all the time coding cool mechanics in, except damage gets rid of the mechanics because the enemy that does the mechanics is now on the other side of eternity. So basically, damage attenuation would slow the game down artificially to give time for new players to witness a boss fight. Generally this is on boss fight or like mini bosses, like necromites and stuff. So with community feedback in mind, they basically have 3 core goals. A, address outlier cases of bosses having a very long time to kill. I didn't know this was an outlier case. These are outlier cases until I read the actual list down here, which lists every single enemy that has it. The biggest bastards in my experience have been EDA, ETA bosses, the assassination over in the Sanctum Anatomica, Infested Oni. I remember from it was the event, but now it's just there. The Kome Steel Path grind, absolutely miserable. I think the Babaos are very stupid. Not a big fan, but like Acolytes or whatever, you can still one-shot them pretty reasonably. But yeah, some of these enemies are way worse than others in terms of, like, I hate Skulls or Decadence. I think that's so lame that I'm doing an exterminate mission and this enemy I've got to kill has damage attenuation. So yeah, pretty annoying. So the outlier cases are the extremely egregious ones where you're spending 45 minutes on an assassination on your EDA runs. That is awful. So yeah, those are the outlier cases they're talking about. B, making player builds feel impactful, which this is basically like, I have it right here. That's why I kind of snapshotted this frame of the video. So lower attenuation and higher health essentially leads to this exact outcome, making player builds feel more impactful. Lower attenuation plus higher health basically equals better player damage feedback, which we really want. That's the point of, like, Warframe is a very progressive game. You progress your damage, it gets higher, it gets more survivable, and your fashion frame progresses too, I guess, right? But the key is you're acquiring mods and acquiring buffs and like fine tuning your whole loadout to do as much damage as humanly possible. And damage attenuation takes away from that. For those who aren't familiar, damage attenuation is essentially, I guess I should have explained this at the start. It's a mechanic where you do X amount of damage. If X is too high, attenuation kicks in and the resistances on enemies go up. Obviously, that sounds like, oh, it can be kind of cool, forces you to do more and more damage. But the problem is, it would ramp so much to the point where your builds that would normally do like 20 mil a shot end up dealing 3,000, which is problematic because the enemy's health is not going down to compensate for that. So in this case, we have the inverse, which is we lower the attenuation but increase the EHP of these enemies, which means that, yeah, we're going to be spending except for the outlier cases, I'm assuming, we're spending like similar amounts of time hosing down enemies with bullets, but we actually get feedback on our gun dealing damage. We're dealing damage to a health pool as opposed to resistances getting jacked up. The time spent feels more productive, and hopefully the time spent is lowered, especially in those outlier cases. But even if it is similar time, at least I can see my damage numbers doing something. Like if I were to bring the same build into the same boss fight, and one has this new system that they're proposing, at least I'll see my build doing a lot of damage. I would be able to tell if I like replace certain suboptimal mods or replace more optimal mods. I would be able to see myself actually deal more damage. In the first case, with the current damage attenuation, it wouldn't matter. My damage would get lowered to like, you know, a couple thousand per shot regardless, and I wouldn't even know how I'm modding wrong, right? It takes so much power and agency away from the player, which if you're making video games, you don't want to do. Again, I don't mean to play armchair dev, but that's just kind of how it goes. And then see, standardizing how damage attenuation applies to the majority of boss type enemies in Warframes. So we'll get on this in a second, but basically, like, from when I watch it, again, you should watch the video, but basically he talks about how like they're gonna kind of blanket standardize a lot of how attenuation works on all these following enemies down here, and then they're gonna have to like proactively change some of them, because some of them are just going to have more obnoxious mechanics, or like just going to be way too easy to kill or way too hard to kill based on the way that they standardize the damage attenuation. So I'm pretty excited for that. I'll kind of regurgitate a little bit of this text, but basically what I want to say, first of all, as someone who's read all this already and also watched the video, I'm excited for this. I never thought they'd address this. I thought they'd just keep adding content islands for the rest of their lives, and maybe in the future address this. I didn't expect this to be this quick, so I'm really excited. So a couple main things are changing is, again, I don't mean to play armchair dev. I can't believe this was tied to a flat value. So damage attenuation would proc when you dealt a flat value of damage, which is, again, in my opinion, this works early on, but where attenuation is needed is later in the game. So this feels insane to me, but I'm glad they're fixing it, right? So now it's going to be based on a percentage of the health. So before it was like if you dealt 10k damage, it would trigger, which is crazy. 10k damage is nothing late game. Now it's based on a percentage of the boss's health pool, which makes so much more sense. This is like kind of how some bosses are just designed. Like, oh, once you deal 50% of an enemy's health, like they become tankier and gain new mechanics. Like that's a pretty basic thing. Again, and they talk about here, they want damage attenuation to be balanced. You know, obviously, like we have a power fantasy game on our hands, so we need to balance accordingly. But in damage attenuation in its current state is just straight up unfun. So firstly, damage attenuation values are not proportional to max health. This is how it always should have been. I genuinely, again, not to be mean, I can't believe this was assigned to a flat value. That's crazy. And then secondly, damage attenuation, maximum damage per second, it now applies to independently between players. This is big. This basically means like everyone is getting their own damage attenuation. So like, if I, again, the example I pulled up earlier of like one veteran player and three kind of like mid game players, they will each, like, the late game player isn't going to sabotage the other three players' damage, which is really good. So basically, let's read right here. What is it? So the amount of damage players can deal per second and per instance now scales off the enemy's max health. So we talked about this before. This is how it should have been for a long time. Our focus with the sweeping change is to establish overall time to kill for enemies within a reasonable range. So again, considering the equipment available, now they have a lot of good information on this. I have to assume their data on this is quite immense. But because, like, so again, this is because since this is a significant change to how damage attenuation is calculated, we'll be increasing the health of various bosses. Again, this is lower attenuation plus increased health equals better damage feedback. This is really important. The goal is to reward players with powerful builds, but still avoid one-shotting Archons. I think with some fine-tuning, this approach is going to work amazingly. I'm very excited for it, personally. If you have any thoughts on that, you should put them in the comments, but I'm excited for this, personally. And this is just independent damage per second per player. This is important, again, so one unemployed guy with an optimized build isn't ruining your experience as a mid to early game player. Very good. I like that a lot. So standardizing damage attenuation. This is the part that I'm very interested in. So damage attenuation is one method, blah, blah, blah. So there's so much to learn in Warframe, and the list only grows to every update. Part of maintaining the decade-long game is reducing the scope of what players need to know. With that in mind, we are replacing existing damage attenuation on various boss types and enemies to standardizing them to using the same system. That's what standardizing is. As mentioned earlier, we are increasing base health values to balance the time to kill for these foes. While larger health pools may increase difficulty, they also increase damage attenuation caps, so because they now scale with max health. So these two changes synergize well with each other. Our hope is that players will hit harder and weapons will feel more satisfying, while also ensuring enemies have a reasonable time to kill on both ends, avoiding one shots, but also, we're not going to be spending 45 minutes on what is essentially a stealth farm now. Not fun. Not a big fan of that at all. So since these changes are still in active development and require careful testing, we are not sharing stat changes in this dev workshop. Looking for an extensive overview in the patch notes. So we can confirm. So this is their whole list of enemies, and then this is like some accessibility screen shake stuff. So what can we say? I am thoroughly excited for this. I did not expect them to take a look at this at all, and they are, and I'm super excited. However, you need to be like very cautiously optimistic. Not that they've messed anything up, because I think this is just a first step though. I think a lot of things need to be done proactively after this change, but this lays out a foundation that tons of good changes can occur on. Again, he mentions it in the video he does here, where he's like, yeah, we're gonna need like feedback from the community when we standardize this. Like, obviously these enemies are nowhere near the same. Gruzzling, Infested Oni, Jackal, Juggernauts, Legocytes, like these enemies interact with attenuation and how frustrating the attenuation is in a lot of different ways. Some of these guys are optional to the content, some of these guys are optional or are literally required for the content, right? So like Zealoid Prelate, oh my god, what a traumatic event for some people, man, I'm sorry. And these Deimos enemies are insanely difficult for no reason. These enemies vary in how frustrating their attenuation is. So when we're doing a blanket standardization, I think we're gonna need like, I don't know, maybe half a year, a couple months until like we have enough proactive information to determine like, well, what minor changes do we need to make? And I think the amount of information that DE is going to be able to grab from that experience of like what players are feeling after the standardization and the changes they make moving forward is going to mean that we are going to get so much better boss and mini boss design, and I'm super excited for that. So overall, I'm really excited to see the future of this game and these mechanics, and to them actually address it in a way that I enjoy and I think is objectively good, and subjectively good in my own opinion. I'm excited. I'm really excited. I hope you are too. If you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments. Much love. Thank you guys for watching this little yap sesh. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.